Welcome to Bistro Buzz Conversations with Shutapa Basu. Bistro Buzz is all about buzzing. When people come to Bistro Buzz, conversations just happen naturally. These conversations are around culture, around art, around lifestyle, around business, around entertainment, around literature, books and essays and blogs and poetry. And Bistrobus also hosts a lot of wonderful guests in live chat with me. So when these debates and discussions and live chats happen, Bistrobus is really rocking. All these guests are very inspirational people, and they have to tell us, and they always leave us food for thought. Basically, all of us here at Bistrobus are having a lot of fun. So why don't you also join the party? All you have to do is go to my Facebook page, Shutapa Basu 20, and look out for Bistro Buzz. And now, let's go to this evening's riveting episode of Bistro Buzz. So let me tell you something about our guests, Deepak Sapra. Sapra is a healthcare and social work proponent as well as an author. He holds the position of the global head of pharmaceutical and active ingredients at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. He's an alumnus of IRIMEE Jamalpur and IIM Bangalore. His education has been in engineering and management. Before joining Dr. Reddy's, he has worked with the Indian Railway Services. He is also a fellow and a Chevening scholar. In 2018, Deepak Sapra published his first book, The Boy Who Loved Trains, a delightful, anecdotal, humorous story connected to trains and journeys on them. He is himself an intrepid traveler. His travel blogs on Japan, Mexico, the North Pole have all been published by the Outlook magazine. Deepak is a co-founder of a charitable trust called Priyajan, an NGO working on disability, social inclusion in South 24 Parganas district in West Bengal, India. He has also worked with India's internal migrants on transportation, COVID-19 precautions, employment opportunities, and cash transfers during the April 2020 to June 2020. Deepak lives in Hyderabad with his family. So this is Deepak Sapra, who wears so many hats. Let's welcome him to Bistro Buzz. Hi, Deepak. Welcome to Bistro Buzz.
Hi,
We're so happy
Shutapa.
to have you here. And I know that you are a very busy person. And so you've taken out time for Bistro Buzz. Thank you so much. So let me quickly go into my first question. Now, you've been a train man, a medicine man, an author, and a travel enthusiast. Now, which role do you love the most?
Thank you. Am I audible, Shutapa? Shutapa,
Deepak,
am I audible?
Yeah, I mean, what is happening is I think your Wi-Fi is not so strong or something. It's like pausing in between.
Okay.
I can hear you now.
Okay, great. So first of all, thank you for the kind words. Thank you for having me here with you on this show. I love this show, and I've listened to some of the very I would say accomplished people on this show in the past, so it's an honor to be here on this show. Thank you. To your question on which role, I think in addition to all the roles we play as professionals, each of us play different kinds of roles as well, which are more permanent. The role of a father, the role of a son, the role of a spouse, the role of a friend. These are more lifelong, and I think these are roles which probably are the ones which I enjoy as much as I enjoy playing the other roles. So playing with my son is probably more has given me more joy in my life than anything else. And likewise, some of the other relationships. But to your specific question on medicine, on trains, on traveler, I think it's always about the role that I'm playing at that moment. The intensity has to be full, whatever role I'm into at that point in time, being in the moment and giving it all at all points of time, especially the two roles that you mentioned, the medicine man and the train man. I think that's been more or less what I've done. The travel part of it is a nice collateral benefit that has come about in both. So yeah, so I would probably not a one word answer to your question, but that's how yeah.
So you began best role is being a family man, right? So that's your best role, actually, your favorite role.
That's true.
Now I'll just pick up each one of your roles. So
Yeah.
as a medicine man, your
Yeah.
organization, Dr. Reddy's, is collaborating on the Sputnik vaccine. Right
Yes.
now, there are a lot of vaccines in the world, and each one has a different efficacy.
Yes.
How does one make sense of all this?
Right. So I do understand there's a lot of confusion all over the world regarding vaccines. There is also some hesitancy. There are people who are adopting a wait and watch approach. So broadly speaking, there are two key considerations when you look at any vaccine, not just a COVID vaccine, any vaccine. These two considerations are on safety and on efficacy. So these are the two things. Now, the safety is about not getting any adverse impact once you have taken the vaccine, and the efficacy is about the difference or the protection that is offered to you by taking the vaccine vis-a-vis a situation where you don't take the vaccine. So what is the difference between those? That's how you measure the efficacy. As far as the coronavirus is concerned, globally there are 4 or 5 vaccines which are in use majorly. The first two vaccines which are there in the two vaccines which are there in the West, one is there by Pfizer, one is by Moderna.
Yeah.
Then
Yes.
there is a vaccine by AstraZeneca, which is also there in India. Then there is a Sputnik vaccine, which is there in about 25 countries around the world. And then there are a few others. For example, India has another vaccine, which is there only in India. So all of these are there. Each of them are based on different platforms, so to speak. Each of them have a different way in which they function inside the body. Each of them have a slightly different methodology by which they give the command to the body to recognize that there is a foreign body attacking you, and therefore you should trigger a response and you should protect the body. So as of now, I think these 4 are well established. The Pfizer, Moderna, Sputnik, and the AstraZeneca are well established. They are present in multiple countries now around the world. And so I would think that these are well proven, safe, efficacious vaccines. And many countries around the world are using them. There are millions of people around the world who have already got vaccinated on these. And I think overall, the benefits far outweigh the risks. So for anybody who's wondering whether it makes sense to get vaccinated or not, unless you have a very unique medical condition, in general, I would recommend that everyone looks at vaccines favorably from the benefit versus risk in the benefit versus risk equation, and gets vaccinated.
That what you just said is very, very useful, especially for people, all of us who are, in the doubt area. So that's it, folks. Please get vaccinated. But Deepak, if we get vaccinated, is it for life? Is it that we are now protected for life? Viewers, please be patient. Yes.
As of now, my answer to that is no. The reason for saying no is that there is not sufficient data available to say that there is lifelong protection. That is why I would say no. What is happening is that every major vaccine developer is generating this data, as this
Right.
data comes in, we will be able to determine how much protection is being given. As of now, broadly, every vaccine is offering about 6 to 9 months of protection, which is also a great starting point. As more and more data gets
Absolutely.
generated, I think this amount will increase. The amount of time it will give you protection will increase, and then we'll be able to see. But as of now, again, just hazarding a guess, an educated guess on this, it appears that 1 to 2 years would be the period that this COVID vaccine would offer protection. And it's likely, just like in the case of flu shots, you have to get your flu
Okay.
shots every year. This might be something on those lines every year or every alternate year. This might be something like that. But it's too early to say that because there isn't sufficient data. As of now, I think the bottom line is it's good to get vaccinated because the benefits outweigh the risk. The protection it's giving to you is for maybe 6 to 9 months as of now, which is increasing with every passing day because more data is getting generated. So be on the
Right.
lookout. But yeah, I think it will have to be repeated a few times before you can say you are protected for life.
So, Deepak, a lot of people in India, I mean, a lot of lay people in India, they believe that India didn't have such a terrible wave as maybe the US or other countries because we take a lot of homemade remedies, and we take a lot of stuff which, our grandmothers tell us to take, and so on. So, and the government itself is globally propagating Indian alternative medicinal practices like Ayurveda. What are they really so effective?
So I think there is a lot of wisdom in the home truths or the home remedies that we have here in India. These many of these things are good in giving you general immunity and general protection. So, for example, if your grandmother says have haldi with doodh, it's something which has been known for centuries to give you immunity and
Have
give you
kada.
protection. Have
Right.
kada, yeah. So these are things which have been around for several years, and these are things which have helped millions of people through thousands of years. So I think that is definitely there, and we should definitely derive the benefit of this wisdom that exists in the world and which is there for so long. At the same time, on the specific situation on COVID, I think the way we look at it scientifically, currently there is no evidence as such that the cure for COVID can come about some of these remedies. I think these are very helpful in enabling protection, giving you more immunity, helping your body fight off external invasions, just like the coronavirus is. And therefore, I think they are very good. To your other question on Ayurveda and others, again, I think these are very sound approaches which have been there for thousands of years. The important thing is to look at it holistically. The important
Yes.
thing is to make sure that we are not losing the perspective and not being blindsided in any one way, and just deal with the body as a holistic integrated whole. And there are many areas, especially the one which we spoke about on immunity and on giving you that kind of protection, which are there in our in alternate forms of medicine, not just Ayurveda but also several others. And many people use it, many people benefit from it. So what I would say is that the current science on allopathy doesn't really give you that evidence, but there are these things which have empirical evidence that it works for many of us, and I think we should absolutely have that wisdom intact and not be very unilateral in the way we think about it.
Basically, if they give us immunity, even if you get corona, you will be you'll be strong enough to fight it. Basically, your body will be strong enough to fight.
Absolutely. I mean, another example could be a lot of people do yoga. A lot of people say that I do a Surya Namaskar so many times. Now, this is something which helps you in the overall context. And, even if you get it, for example, it might be mild. And there are chances that if there is a small attack, you might not even get it. So it's, I think all in the body is a holistic, integrated piece of magic, and I think we should just look at it that way, and not just from the standpoint of a medicine or a vaccine or a virus.
Right, right. Now let's come to what you were doing before you were looking at medicines and pharma and Dr. Reddy's. As a trained man, as industries go, railways are very different, right, from the pharma. So how would you compare the two? I mean, what is the comparison and what is the contrast?
Sure. So first, the comparison. I think the biggest comparison that I see is that being in these professions gives you the opportunity to impact a large number of people. So, for example, one train would typically carry, let's say, 1,500 to 2,000 people. And then 2,000 people are going from one place to another. They're getting connected. So many connections are getting created. So there is that direct impact that you're creating on so many people with just one train that you're running. And you multiply it with the thousands of trains, and you have very, very large numbers of impact, a very, very large number of people who are getting impacted. Likewise in medicine, and many of you would be aware, India is almost the medicine capital of the world. The medicines we make in India are available in almost every country in the world. About 80% of the United Nations list of essential medicines are actually made in India. More than 50% of the vaccines that are there in the world are made in India. So here in India, we do have the chance to impact a large number of people through medicines as well. Just like on trains, we have the ability to create large impact. So that's where I see the similarity. The contrast, on the other hand, one of the contrasts that I see is that in the trains, in the train world, you are measured every single day. If the train reaches on time safely, you've done your job. You've done a good job. People reach there. You got what you wanted, and it never stops. Similarly, in the medicine world, I think there are people consuming your medicine at all points in time, and if they are getting cured or if the medicine is offering the protection, then you've done your job. At the same time, the process of bringing a new medicine the process of bringing a new medicine to the world takes a very long time. Sometimes it can be more than 10 years from the time you start to the time it actually comes. So this is an industry with a very, very long lead time. Likewise in trains, for example, if you're introducing a new technology or introducing a new kind of locomotive or a new kind of coach, it could take time, but I think it's not as long as you see here in medicines. In medicines, the lead times are much longer. So there is a very good chance that the work you do, you will probably not be able to see the impact of that. It will probably be seen much later.
Many years later.
Yeah.
So there is somebody who's asking you a question, and it's going back to the vaccine. So Mona Verma asks, what can we predict about the mutants?
Yeah. So we know that there are 3 or 4 mutants that are that have impacted a large number of people.
Yes.
As of now, some of these mutants are believed to be more, I would say, dangerous, if I can use that word. Dangerous in the sense that they spread faster, and also because they are not fully tested against the current vaccines. So that is still ongoing. No vaccine currently is tested against all the mutants. I do believe that given the technology that has been used in some of them, they will offer protection against the UK variant and the South African variant, but it's still to be tested. As of now, it's not known. So the vaccines that are available still remain our best bet.
In fact, saying that, yes.
The usual things of keeping yourself masked and maintaining the social distance.
Yes, absolutely. So let's get back to the railways. What is your most memorable moment of your railway life as a train man?
So actually, the moment you're on a train and the train starts rolling, it gives a kind of a thrill which still, if I just imagine it, it sets the adrenaline flowing, and it just gives a very different kind of energy. So every time you board a train and the train starts moving, there is something which starts happening. At least personally, I feel the kind of thrill I feel, the kind of joy I get when it starts moving. I think that is something to die for. And when I was in the railways, of course, in addition to being a traveler on the trains, I also had the job to make them run and make them run safely. So that was something which was also very different. But the joy and the excitement every time a train starts moving, to me, that is the most memorable part of a train journey. I can't really pinpoint any one moment when one thing happened, but this is just something to die for. And this is something which I would not trade for anything else. Even today, anywhere I have to go, if I have to make a choice between taking a train and any other way of getting to the other place, I would always go for the train, because there's something that happens in me, and there is a kind of joy and thrill and excitement which which the train journey offers.
And I can't agree more with you, because my father was in the army and we would move everywhere on those trains. And as a child, the moment we boarded the train, oh, we were so excited. Everything about the train, the food that will come, and, what all we will see from outside the window, the games we will play on the train. So it was a very, very, so I can completely, understand what you're saying about when the train starts and, the kind of energy and excitement you feel. So I totally agree. And that is why I think you wrote your first book, which says The Boy Who Loved Trains. And it was a runaway hit. I know. What inspired you? I know that you love trains, but still, what inspired you to write that book?
So one of the things which inspired me was the story of everything that goes into making the trains run. A lot of us who travel by trains view one part of the picture, but behind the scenes, there is so much that's going on. There are
so much more.
Thousands and millions of people who are doing so much to make a train run. The fact that a train is moving is an outcome of so many things happening backstage. And whatever is happening backstage has such a huge amount of human element to it that I wanted to tell that story. And it was that human element, that element of so many people doing so many things, that interconnectedness backstage, which enables the train to run and enables so many people to get reconnected or do whatever they want to do. I think that is a fascinating aspect of trains. And I just wanted to bring that backstage story, the human connection on the backstage story, the element of the human element really to life. And that's what I attempted to do in the book.
So some of those incidents could have been from your own life. So is there any incident that you would like to tell us, which is in the book you yourself have experienced?
Sure. Actually, most of the book is almost based on personal experience. Some of the things are based on the experiences of my friends or others who I knew. So maybe there's one I would like to tell. This one is
love to hear.
Is about a train which I was in a place called I was working in a place called Burdwan, where I was responsible for the maintenance of the locomotives. And then there's a train called Coalfield Express, which crosses Burdwan, which crosses Burdwan but does not stop there. So the previous stop is Durgapur, and after that the next stop is Howrah. So it doesn't stop at Burdwan. And so my friend at that point in time, and now my life partner Ipsita, was on that train. I knew that she's on that train, and there was no way I could. I didn't even know where she is on that train. It's a long train, and I thought that let me try and meet her while the train is crossing the platform. So I stood at the end of the platform from where the train enters, and I kind of made a calculated guess that she's likely to be in the AC chair car coach. and there was only one coach in that train at that point in time. So I
Okay.
kind of waited for the train to roll in. As that coach rolled in, I boarded that coach, went through went through the aisles, uh, hoping to find her, and found her, and handed over a gift, and then got down from the other side of the coach while the train traversed the platform. So maybe about
My
20.
God. Oh my God. That's fantastic.
So yeah, I think that's
That's fantastic. And I know I have been on Coldfield fast speed train. Yeah, it was a very fast speed train. God, how did you do it? It just shows, romance and love, what it can make a person do. Lovely. And was
so
she surprised to see you? Did she expect to see you?
no, she didn't, and she was definitely
She
surprised.
did. Oh, wow, wow. That's a better than a Valentine's Day's gift, I'm sure. Now, that book of yours
Mhm.
has really, I mean, what you have said, one element behind the entire journey of any passenger on that train, all the people who actually help him or her to go from one place to another, has been an eye opener. So, how have people reacted to I mean, what was the response basically from your readers on the book?
So I think the response has been very, very positive. What it has done is it has helped a lot of people reconnect with their own journeys. It has helped a lot of people revive some of their
Yes.
old memories. It has given a sense of nostalgia to a lot of people, and I think that's been very heartening when they say that I read this and it connected me or took me back to those days. I think that's been very, very gratifying. In addition to this, there have also been a lot of people who have responded because they used to work either on the railways or in the places that have been mentioned on the book. And they said, yeah, I know this, I know that, I was at this place. That is the second thing. The third is there have also been people who have got connected to something that their parents did. So, for example, there's a lady who's about 55 now, lives in Australia, who wrote to me after the book saying that her father was uh, somebody of Anglo-Indian origin. He was an engine driver on the railways in India, and after which they migrated to Australia. And she said that reading there's one chapter on the Anglo-Indians on the Indian railways. She said that I cried on reading that chapter, and it almost took me back to those days that it's
It
my
was
father
everything.
who's being
Mm.
described there. So yeah, so these three, four kind of things. One is people connecting to their journey, saying that, yeah, I did this, I did that, I went there. Second is about the places, and third is about these kind of connections which people had with people who were in their family or loved ones working on the railways. So very, very heartening and gratifying to get that kind of feedback.
And listen, just see this one feedback which is coming. Deepak outed Chaya Chaya. It's Mona for you. And so, what are you writing next? What's your next writing project?
Okay, so as of now, I think the thing I'm writing the most every day is hundreds of WhatsApp messages to just keep my life going. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to complete the book, which is about 70% in the next one. It's a book based on, again, almost based on real life experience of my parents. It's a partition story. It's
Oh,
based. It's a 1947 book, uh, and the events of 1947 from the eyes of two children, a 6-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. So my father and mother were that age at the time of partition. Both two families uprooted from Lahore and migrating eastwards to India, and respectively going to Shimla and Delhi. So that's the story. It's about partition from the lens of two small children. And broadly, the theme is that in spite of all the horrors of partition, uh, how the innocence of children keeps things positive and upbeat in families which are going through very difficult circumstances. So the backdrop is 1947, but stories about children and how just the joy that children provide, how that enables a family to cope through a very, very difficult external situation.
Beautiful. I think it will be a very evocative book, and I'm waiting for it to come out. Deepak, you must finish it. I know you're busy, but you must finish it for all of us readers.
Yeah, I hope so
Now,
as
you've
well.
also written a lot of you've also written a lot of travel blogs, right? I mean, interesting ones like the one from you've been seeing North Pole from the top, and then you've written about that. So it's evident that you like traveling. So tell us, does it make you different, or has it made you different? Has it changed you in any way?
So traveling is one of the most thrilling experiences that one can have. In my view, it just opens you up to so many new things and possibilities to realize that everything is largely rooted in one central human connection. So to me, traveling it's like an onion. It's like you start peeling the layers of an onion. Places appear to be different. People appear to be different. Once you start peeling a few layers, at the core of it, I think we are all connected by a very, very strong human thread. And I think that's what traveling does. It opens you up to a host of people and places and situations, and makes you realize the very, very strong sense of connectedness that we all have with each other. So in that sense, to me, travel is less about places and monuments and large buildings or even big waterfalls. It's about creating those human connections with people who are there, who are at different places, who are going about their life, and how you can connect and relate to them.
Absolutely. In fact, I think traveling is also the best education. Especially, I think for children or young people, nothing teaches you geography, history, sociology so well traveling does. Because I've also traveled a lot, and that is something that has definitely shaped my personality. But I must tell you one small thing that I used to always feel as a child. So when I would travel from one place to the other, I would wonder, uh, is that world also going on where I've come from? And then I would look at the moon, and I would think, okay, I think they're also looking at the moon. So that is how I'm connected. You know,
Oh,
so
nice.
sometimes you get this feeling of disorientation that, oh, world is also going on. This world is going on, but is that also going on?
Right.
So
On
yes,
that, I
travel
may
can make
a small joke. I read
yeah.
it in a children's magazine called Tinkle, which we used to read as So there's a person who goes to a new city, and then he starts arguing with another person that the thing up there in the sky, whether it's the sun or the moon. So they're fighting with each other, and they're saying, "No, we are willing to bet." And then they ask a third person who's just passing by, "Hey, is that the sun or the moon?" Then the third person says that, "Look, I don't know. I'm new to this place."
Good one. That is a good one.
So your
Lovely.
moon being a source of connection, I think.
Yes, yes. Yeah. So how did you cope with all the travel ban that happened over the last year?
Oh, it's been very, very difficult. Not just from the standpoint of not being able to travel, but also not being able to meet the people I wanted to meet. I think that has been very tough. Fortunately, we've had these kind of video connections, which help to see, but still there is nothing that can replace physical human connection. So it was very, very tough. I think there's no way anything can make up for it, and especially meeting my father, meeting other family members. I think that didn't happen for a long time, and finally when I traveled after 7-8 months of not traveling, since then it's almost I've let myself loose again, and I think yeah, it should be okay now, given that things are getting better and the vaccine is coming in. But overall, I think international travel is still unlikely to open up in
Yes.
India for another 6 to 9 months. I think 2021 will still go away like that. But we have lots of things in India to travel to and go to, and lots of people to meet. So that's good. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. Passion for the needy. So tell us what you did with the migrants in 2020.
Mm. So, it was a very difficult time in the month of April and May when the lockdown happened and a lot of people were stuck in different places. So, what we tried to do in our own little way was to facilitate transportation for a large number of people, people from Hyderabad, people who were working in Hyderabad, and many of them suddenly experienced the lockdown. So their employer said factory closed, or please, there's nothing, no work. So they had to go back mainly to Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Bihar, UP, West Bengal. So a lot of them were walking. A lot of them were taking random ad hoc modes of transport and just moving. Many of them were with families, many of them were with young children. So, what we tried to do was to organize buses which could go point to point. So, get people together for a destination. So, let's say you get 45 people together to go from Hyderabad to Gorakhpur, and then organize buses here and organize the bureaucracy that was required to enable the bus to cross through several states. At that point in time, you would remember India was no longer just one country where you could move freely. You required permits from
Yeah, the
every
borders. Yes, the borders
yeah. And so we did that for
were all closed. Correct.
organized about 45 buses for different people. So Gorakhpur, Patna, and Jharsuguda. So those kind of destinations. Then also there were some people who were very far away, and we were not able to get the required numbers to organize a bus in a manner that we could have the requisite numbers. So we facilitated the movement of others by train, also some people by plane, and I negotiated with the airlines to kind of sell their seats at variable cost to allow these people to go, and some of them really helped. So Indigo helped, AirAsia helped, and we were able to just get people by plane, and that was much quicker. It was the peak of summer, April, May. It was very, very hot.
Yes, I know.
And on trains, trains were not as many as were required, but the main activity on trains was about facilitating the process of getting the tickets, facilitating the process of uh, facilitating the process of the permits, the getting the reservations, and all those things. So that's what we did, and as a result of it, overall, in those 2 months, I think between me and Ipsita and a few friends, we were able to transport about 3,500 people from Hyderabad to other parts of India. So it's a small thing. I know there were like crores of people.
That's a lot.
In our own small way, we tried to kind of pitch in at that point in time.
And I mean, the pictures, I think we will always live with those pictures which are there in our minds of all those people walking on the roads in that heat, children, and carrying their luggage. So if people like you were able to help them, I think whatever little you've done is much, much more than, it's all these drops that make the ocean. So
yeah, I mean, thank you for that.
Thank you very much. We should all thank. We wanted to do, couldn't do. You've done it.
Oh, thank you. It was very heartbreaking, Shatapa, that time to see that situation. And there were just so many people with children and vulnerable, elderly women, and just walking and with no idea of how and when the next transportation would happen. So, in whichever way that happened, I think it's probably one of the most meaningful things I believe I've done in my life in that April-May timeframe. So yeah, glad that in our own way we were able to pitch in and at least support a few people.
Very, very inspiring actually. Now, let me come to the inspiration part. In your address to IIM Bangalore, you have advised students exactly, these are your words, I'm quoting you, maximize on your experience in whichever way you deem fit. Is that your
So
you are our hero.
He is very kind, Dipankar. So I think that's true for each one of us. We have a world around us wherever we are. If we can maximize the quantity as well as quality of our experiences that we have around us, if we do that, I think that enriches life so much, that opens up so many new possibilities, opens up so many new doors, and also gives you material to write new books. So so I think
That's for us. We are going to benefit.
No, I think I feel so inspired. Actually, I've read the books that you've written. You've converted, you've looked at historical personalities. You've looked at Genghis Khan, somebody who has a very different kind of a perception in India. And then when you read the book, when you realize this, the story, the nuances, the things that he goes through as an individual, I think then you realize that there is so much more to every person, no matter how deified or vilified he is in popular folklore or in history. And I think that is just amazing. And every person is an ocean of stories. And if you're able to get into that person's life, if you're able to put yourself in the feet of into the other person's shoes, I think it just enriches you more than anything else. And if you're getting enriched by other people's life, chances are that you will also be able to enrich other people in your own small way.
Thank you so much, Deepak. Deepak, you have inspired us. Whoever may have enriched your life, you have enriched our lives. There is no doubt about that. Thank you so much, Deepak, for being with us at Bistro Buzz. And audience, thank you so much for being with us. There was some technical patience, and thank you so much, Deepak. Have a very good evening. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.